Hey everyone, it's Wednesday, the Wednesday after the 2018 midterm elections, and show of hands, how many of you are just like, man, I'm glad that is over with. Now, I'm sure a lot of you, either last night or this morning, were happy with the results. Some of you, on the other hand, were anxious about the results. And that's actually what I want to talk about today at noon, is this idea or this problem of worry and anxiety. I'm reminded this morning or this afternoon of something that the late evangelist Billy Graham said sometime back in the mid 60s of the last century, that historians will probably look at our age and refer to it as the age of anxiety and worry. And I think that's a huge issue, and I've had to deal with it. And here's the interesting thing. The vast majority of people in our culture have had to deal with it. Even people who seem to have tons of money and tons of power and tons of influence, and you would think, hey, they got it all put together, but they still deal with worry. And we need to understand it's a big deal. Now, we need to have a concern. We need to do our own thing. We need to be responsible. But worry is this overwhelming fixation on things that we cannot change, that things that are outside of our scope of influence, and they just consume us. And really they kill us. And here's what we need to understand, that worry does not help, but it actually will hurt us. When you look at the Gospels, Matthew chapter 13, Jesus tells this parable. It's called the parable of the soil, and the gospel goes out and it lands in different types of soil. And he refers to one that has thorns in it. And he talks about the fact that the message of God's love is planted in this heart, but the thorns come up. And he refers to that as the worries of life that choke the faith. And when you think about it, worry really chokes us, and it has all kinds of physical ramifications in our body. Worry is a bad thing. And when I think about it more and more, worry actually might be sin. And here's what I mean by that. About a year ago, I was listening to a guy named Alistair Begg talk about worry, and he made the observation that worry actually might be sin, because what you're doing is you're putting yourself almost into the place of God, that I am God, it's my responsibility to figure this out, and I'm going to do it, and we don't trust God. So worry's a bad deal, however you cut it. So what do we do about it? Well, we have to stop. And it's interesting, when you go to Matthew chapter 6, Jesus tells us, verse 25, he even says, do not worry. And then the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, he says the same thing. He says, do not be anxious about anything. Well, how do you do that? I mean, how do you tell someone to stop worrying? It's kind of hard. Well, there are some things that you can do, and even today, if you go back to Philippians 4 again, the latter part of verse 6, Paul says two things. He says, well, number one, with prayer, and then he also says with thanksgiving. Now that's huge, and I've talked a lot about Thanksgiving before on the Midweek with Steve show. And if we can stop focusing on everything that's negative and think about what God has already done, think about what we already have, think about the prayers that God already has answered, because Satan wants to distract us with everything that's not going right. And then Paul follows this up a little bit in verse 8, where he has this litany of positive things. In verse 8, he says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable. And then he goes on to describe a number of positive things. And his whole point there is that we need to reprogram our thinking, to spend more time focusing on the things that are good instead of the things that we can't change. So we reprogram our thinking. And then also, what are we seeking? Going back to Jesus in chapter 6 of Matthew again, verse 33, he said, seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added to you. And then number 4, what can we do about the worry? Well, just do the next thing. In other words, what's the next logical thing on your plate that you can control? Just do that. Now, Winding down, I'm reminded of a passage in 1 Peter chapter 5, where Peter talks about two things in regard to worry. And the latter part of the verse, verses 5 through 7, he says, cast all your cares on the Lord. And maybe you need to do that today. Write whatever is just causing you angst. Write it down on a paper, wrap it on a rock, and go throw it in the lake or something. But in the preceding verse, he says that we are to humble ourselves. And the context is this: when we get to a place where we admit to God, God, I'm not God. You're going to have to take care of this. The universe does not revolve around me, and I'm going to humble myself, relax, and let you take care of the things I can't take care of. Now, I hope that that's helpful for you. Ultimately, it comes down to Jesus Christ. And in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus said this, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So I hope that's helpful for you. Are you dealing with worry today? Think about what Jesus has said. Think about the positives, recount the positives, and just trust him to handle things that you can't handle, ultimately just putting your life in his hands. Now, if you have anything else to add to this, put it in the comment boxes below. And also, if you find these midweek discussions helpful, share them with someone else. Follow and like the Kingdomology Facebook page, the Kingdomology blog, and then also the reason why I'm recording these now is because I just started a YouTube channel. You can find it on that as well. And then finally, I want to update you again. We are less than 3 weeks away from Confessions. Finding Hope Through One Pastor's Doubt hits the market. You can pre-order that today on Amazon. But anyway, be strong, and we'll see you again next week.